13 Questions by Man Transcending. Manhood in the Digital Age. Welcome back to 13 Questions. Tonight you have myself, Bill, and Guy. How did you find our guest here, Mr. Bill?
So I came across Guy via another podcast episode on the Amish Inquisition podcast, which is hosted by Amish Phil, who should sound familiar to you because we had him as a guest recently. So go back and check out that episode if you haven't yet. But yeah, Guy works for the Heroic Hearts Foundation, and they help veterans who suffer with PTSD overcome that via the facilitating of contact with people that can host retreats that use psychedelics as a means of healing. So definitely super cool foundation to check out, and if you need help and you're a veteran, definitely check him out. So after hearing him talk on the Amish Inquisition podcast, I just wanted to reach out and see if he'd come on, because he speaks from a place, from the heart space, right? So, and that's kind of something that I'd like to think that we try to do here at 13 Questions. So I thought it was an awesome interview.
It was great. It was a very from the heart interview, very heart centric, and yeah, you said it right. It was a good interview.
Yeah, a lot of honesty, and which is good when we're talking from the heart. So definitely something that I'm looking forward to sharing with our listeners. And yeah, I've got a gratitude lined up if you want to do a gratitude jingle.
Absolutely. While I pull that up, yeah, I really do want to say too that the guest it's such a beautiful thing to want to do with your life, to go through so many experiences, and how he wants to help people deal with just addressing death and its place in the world. And it's, I don't know, just an amazingly beautiful thing. So I think you guys are going to enjoy that, especially in our society, because, we don't talk about death and its our role in it, and our place in the world, and how important it is to just address and be aware. So for that, Bill, I am grateful.
Gratitude, 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 oh, gratitude. Gratitude, 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 oh, gratitude.
So I just got to say that it's kind of a little bit super weird that my gratitude also involves the theme of death. It seems to be a theme during the interview too, but the day that we were recording this happens to be the day before a federal holiday in the United States known as Martin Luther King Day. And if you are familiar with Dr. King, you will know that he was assassinated. And we just so happened to interview a man who had the pleasure of working with the King family in the capacity of a physician by the name of Ken Rolla. I don't remember the episode number right now, but it is in the back catalog. So definitely go check that episode out, because my gratitude is that I'm thankful for Ken and the work that he continues to do with the King family. He actually has a webinar later on that I'm hoping to catch, talking about what happened to the King family after the assassination and their court battles that ensued. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, check out Ken's work. And yeah, it's my gratitude is that I'm super happy that we got to talk to that guy. And I just think that he's continuing to call attention to something that often I think might get overlooked, even though that there's a whole holiday dedicated to this. Like, I don't think people remember that his family won in court. They sued the government for $1 and won, and proved that Dr. King was assassinated. So, good job, Ken. Keep up the good work, and thanks. Kind of a little heavy one to have you roll into your gratitude, or we could use your gratitude from before you played the jingle if you wanted.
Something that the guest brought up that I really like being aware of, and I'm thankful that I can be aware of. And I think it's one of those tools for hacking reality. It's understanding that language, symbology, that there really is something to that. You know, it's a substantive thing that we use to communicate ideas and thoughts between each other. And everything in the world that is built upon things in which we cannot create just on our own are intrinsically created with this tool, you know, this thing that different languages have different ways of portraying thought and ideas and what manifests from those ideas that we put together. And I think it's just I'm very grateful to be able to be aware of that tool. I think it becomes very important when you have, as we get into the episode, mantras, the power of words, you know, things that you say to yourself, how you speak, understanding linguistics. And, you know, even if it's just neurolinguistic programming, you know, predictive programming, things like that, you know, don't forget your keys, hacking those words, not saying that because you will forget your keys, and that is the power of language in modifying your thought, though that's not the best example. But yeah, I don't know. I'm very grateful to be aware of language. So many people, and throughout most of my life, I didn't think of it in that magical way, that everything we have, that we've communicated, that we've built, you know, is built upon language. It is a foundation of our power. And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, it's super powerful too. I mean, just look at Dr. King and his "I Have a Dream" speech. Like the man's words united so many people that he became an issue for some other people. And well, you know what happened. But
listen, you get on the right frequency with right people, you know, the right ideas, the right words, the right thoughts. It resonates. It spreads like wildfire in a way that can't be controlled. And I mean, those people go down in time immemorial for their contributions. And what was it? A way of thinking, communicating that to others, and people resonating.
Yeah, communication. It's something that we hope that we're doing a good job of here at 13 Questions. So if you're enjoying the guests that we're bringing on and everything that we're doing with the show, we are actually, should mention this, we are actually debuting our second logo with this episode that was designed by Blake Art, who was the guest on the last episode. So definitely check that one out if you haven't already. But yes, communication. And
if you guys like what you hear, it is value for value. You know, what are we worth to you? Contribute, you know, send us your guests, send us your email, send us your comments, help us keep the lights on, help us grow the show, help us improve the equipment, help us do all the wonderful things. You know, if you find a garden and you like it and you enjoy this garden, water it in whatever way that you can, and you will see it grow, and we will reach out and, I don't know, keep doing what we're doing. Tell your friends.
Be a part of the magic. Spread the love. Tell your friends. That's the best way to help the show.
And we are open source. The questions can change. That's based on your input. You know, the guests are based on your input. Everything is based on you. Could you record your own episode and send it in? We're open format.
And there's going to be some updates to the website coming that will emphasize that aspect more. So definitely be on the lookout for that also.
So enjoy the logo. Check out Blake's art. It's going to be in the show note. I hope you guys enjoy the episode with our guest and you check out his programs. He is a fascinating guy. If you want to know more about the show, 13questionspodcast@gmail.com if you want to communicate with us, or click in the show links. But either way, thank you for joining us. Thank you so much for being part of 13 Questions. And thank you for making it what it is. We could not be here without your help.
All right. Question number 1. What was the best advice ever given to you? And would you modify it at all today?
So historically, I've been awful at taking advice or listening to advice. I think that stemmed from my childhood, just always being rebellious and the way that, I guess I just didn't have very many role models growing up. Until I sort of hit the military. But in terms of advice, I think it was just my nan, She's like it was in her last year of life, and I'd moved in with her. And she used to sit in this little armchair watching the TV, and I'd come back in after a day's work, or I'd been at university or something. And she'd just turn into Yoda, and I'd just sit down next to her, and she'd just look over, and I'd look at my nan, and I'd just be like, "What's up, nan?" She's like, the best one was, "Guy, don't become despondent. Keep moving forward." And it just hit me. And I was just, because she must have just picked up on my energy and completely known where I was at. And she's very quiet, or not very quiet, but quite quiet in her last year of life. And it just taught me a lot about advice in general, really, which is like, it's well-timed advice that is attuned to how that person is feeling is so influential. And it really did just make me switch on to the present moment and understand that people around me are looking out for me. And would I modify it? No, it's sort of like a little Yoda Nan mantra that I live by now. Like, keep moving forward. Like, if I become despondent, if I catch myself becoming despondent, why have I just watched Netflix for 4 hours? Why have I downloaded a dating app? Like, no, go out, see the world, like, get out there, like, go and do something about your despondency and energize yourself, with your body, and keep moving. So I wouldn't modify it. And it probably also taught me not to give unsolicited advice or just listen to someone else's advice and just pass it on. It's like, no, it's got to be well timed, and you've got to pick those words carefully. And that's what came up for me.
I love the analogy to Yoda.
Yeah, because like little hunched over, like she's moving along nice and slowly, then out of nowhere, actually Yoda
spitting out sage wisdom.
Yeah.
But I love what she started with, the don't become despondent. That reminds me of something that I wrote down for myself recently, was to stay inspired. And if you stay inspired, then obviously that helps with not becoming despondent, but it also helps to see a path forward, which is what the second half is, what she was talking about. Keep moving forward. So
and it's almost like I can feel myself slipping into those low vibration sorts of emotions and energy, and it is just taking that pause and being like, you know, like in the Matrix, in the first couple scene where Trinity flies through the window and she's lying on her back waiting for the agent to like fly through the door. Like if you think of that symbolically, that's your neurosis coming for you through that window. And she's like, get up, Trinity, get up. And she does. And it's like, it's that same sort of feeling for me. It's like, don't lie down on your back here. Like nothing's going to happen unless you get up and get going.
Yeah, movement is life for sure. If you're not moving, you're not making progress, right? Question number 2. What do you choose to ignore?
What do I choose to ignore? I choose to ignore people acting out of fear, perhaps, or people acting from a place of trauma. It's not that I choose to ignore their emotions. It's that I just choose to ignore their inconsistency, which actually helps me to be more present for people like that, because I know that it's coming from a place of chaos or a place that they can't really control. And like the most recent example is I've just been conned 220 quid. Some guy told me he was going to fix my car, came and picked it up, took it away, told me he fixed a part, charged me for labor in the part, gave it back to me. It broke down 2 days later. I got a call out. I got a guy to come out and he was just laughing, which got me laughing as well. And he was there like, no one's touched that car part. The bolts are still rusty. This guy's just hit your starter motor like so, hit my starter motor, started my car straight away. And he was there like, it will need replacing, but he's had you for 220 quid. So I go back into the gym because this was outside of the gym. I work in a gym. And my friends are sort of like, well, what are you going to do? And these are my friends who've lived in my hometown. I haven't lived here for a long time. I've recently moved back. And my friends are fairly handy or fisty or whatever you want to call it. Like they will get in the car, take me to the house and sort of have it out on the doorstep. But I chose not to. I was there like, no, okay, I won't bother. I went with a friend late at night at 10 o'clock, like had to walk along to where his house was. And I just looked up from the outside and it was so run down. Like curtains were hanging off the railings and the garden was horrible and the area wasn't nice. And the next day I went back to the gym and I was there like, I'm letting it go. And my friend was there like, you can't let this go. You gotta tell this bloke. And I did. I messaged him and I was like, look, you know what you've done. I know what you've done. But I'm not going to take it forward. And I just put up on Facebook this post about what had happened, but without naming his name and just sort of saying there's a lot of people around Taunton at the moment. Like, according to the garage that I then took my car to, this has happened 3 times in the same month. Not from the same person. But I put it on Facebook anyway. And then everyone just started telling me to name and shame. And they were like, no, like you've got to name this person. And I was there like, yeah, but listen to the lesson. I picked a random guy to fix my car. I didn't check his certification. He doesn't own a garage. You know, like I've let someone in there through my own naivety. And like, that's the lesson. And they're like, no, that's not on. Like, you've got to tell us who it is. And they just came out. They came after me. I was there on Facebook. I was there. I said, if anyone through good business will help me recover my losses by sharing my business page so I can generate that £220, then for me, that's like a great lesson of letting go and turning that into a positive. And it just didn't go like that. People were like with their pitchforks. It was like, you know, in Shrek, they were like, they wanted to know who it was. And
that's a
like
weird
that.
way of going against nature. You're kind of looking at, there's wolves in the world. There's a lot of them out there. You need to know how to be aware. I let my guard down. I got bit. That's on me. Like, if you want to go out and shame, like, you're never going to stop there's too many shady business people that take advantage of just that. So yeah, that's funny that vitriol would come from the opposite side of that.
Yeah, and it just taught, I don't know, I haven't quite figured out what lesson it's taught me. First of all, I managed to let go of it very quickly through that interaction, because I very quickly wanted to protect this guy who had just ripped me off, because all these people wanted to hunt him down, find out who he was, and smear his name across town. So I went from being really angry towards this person, because I'm short on money, so is everyone in January. I'm a student, I'm a veteran, like I'm trying to make ends meet. But like for me, like wherever I can let something big like that go, and how quickly I can let it go and turn it into a positive as a spiritual practice. And I thought other people would sort of get it. And like 5 or 6 people on Facebook did get it, but that was my second lesson. Don't post this sort of stuff on Facebook. Tell your close friends, and maybe report the person to trading standards, but he didn't have a business. But anyway, I choose to ignore actions like that because that person was struggling. Like I saw the way he gave me his car, you know, he's like dental care, not there, like very like hunched over shoulders, living in this house. And it's like, okay, I can ignore his action, and I just send him a message and say, I hope you spend, you know, that money like well and on yourself, and then move on and ignore and go. And that's it. And it's so much nicer than holding on to that for a long time and dwelling on it.
Yeah, dude, that's amazing. That's how you transmute energy. And especially like on social media, it's so easy for people to name and shame, right? It's so easy to be mean when you don't have to like interact with the person, you know, in person, right? So the fact that you didn't do that, despite all the pressure to do so, is like, you know, that's super, you know, that's awesome. Because that person, you know, he's probably struggling too. And like you said, you know, I hope you spend the money well, even though he's a giant, you know, he obviously he didn't treat you correctly. You had compassion and you turned it around and you made it into something good. And then you're sharing it as an example, which I think is awesome because, you know, what you said for the answer, what I'm getting is you're choosing to ignore people that are acting out of fear. And to me, that says people that are acting, you know, maybe without all the facts. And, you know, fear and love, fear and hate to me are synonymous, I guess. Hate is just love without facts is what I take away from that. And then throwing the whole social media thing, it just makes it worse.
Yeah, it's just not natural, is it? Like in what natural world would someone suddenly find out, would a whole community of people suddenly find out someone's name who's done one person wrong? Like it will probably just come. I've told my close friends like who it is, but that's just the ripple. Like it'll just come back in some way. Not that I'm expecting it to go back to this person, but it's just, you know, bad business. Like you're not going to generate good business, and that person will learn.
Right, that ripple effect isn't like. I'm glad that you pointed that out too, because are you just going to perpetuate that string of negativity that he started, or are you going to change it? And because whatever you put out, you're going to put back. You're going to get back, right? So
absolutely.
All right, question number 3. What book has been most influential on your life and why?
I'm so into reading right now. Before university, I would read fiction, maybe like real basic stuff. And then when I went to uni, I could barely read a page without having to start that page again. Especially if it's stuff about research or emotions or psychology or spirituality. It was just taking a long time to go in. And then I had this sort of big breakthrough and stuff with my PTSD on psychedelics. And I guess now it's like when I read any book, I'm reading it for the acquisition of language to be able to explain my spiritual experience or my religious experience, whatever you want to call it, mystic experience that I had on psychedelics that went from a state of suicidal ideation, despair, all the grief, anger, hate, to the complete opposite, like courage, joy, peace, love. And now when I read, it's amazing. Who do I read? I love Carl Jung. I love what I've learned from Carl Jung in terms of the symbolic, in terms of the archetypes, and Caroline Pearson, her book, which sort of talks about what's his name? Who came up with the archetypes first of all? What's his name?
The philosopher that came up with the archetypes, or
no, it's like the book of. Hold on. I can't believe I forgot his name. Joseph Campbell. Yeah, Joseph Campbell, the hero with 1,000 faces. So the monomyth, that through all stories, they follow a very follows a structure that's sort of like been told throughout time through fairy tales, through the antiquities, and so learning about the symbolic, which means that when stories are written in a certain way, it's like I'm learning something in depth instead of at page level. So I might have read a book a couple of years ago on Zen Buddhism, and then I might come back to it now that I've had all these sort of breakthroughs and sort of like self-understanding, and suddenly that page, instead of it being a millimeter thin, it's like a thick wedge of like beautiful information that just pours right into my heart, and it's just changing the way that I read. So Letting Go by David Hawkins, that was a recent book that I read, which gave me a lot of language, and also a sort of an idea of how people come up with methods which dissolve the ego in terms of therapy or psychotherapy, instead of just managing neurosis and trying to like turn down someone's sort of like neurotic thoughts. Instead, actually like working with the whole ego to dissolve it so that you can truly understand the self. Caroline Myss, The Anatomy of Spirit, another beautiful book which has got to start teach me about energy, and like to do with the chakra systems, and then a beautiful book by John O'Donoghue called Anam Cara, which translates to soul friend. It's Celtic spiritual wisdom, and that book's just awesome. It's I could barely read it when I first picked it up. It was just too tender. Like it was too difficult to read, but now it's always near me. I don't know where it is now. Yeah, here it goes. I got to read one page. Page 26. It's my favorite page. When the human mind began to consider the next greatest mystery of life, the mystery of love, light was also always used as a metaphor for its power and presence. When love awakens in your life, in the night of your heart, it is like the dawn breaking within you. Where before there was anonymity, now there is intimacy. Where before there was fear, now there is courage. Where before in your life there was awkwardness, now there is rhythm and grace and gracefulness. Where before you were jagged, now you are elegant and in rhythm with yourself. When love awakens in your life, it is like a rebirth, a new beginning. And like for me, like learning self-love as the first, like unconditional self-love, which gave me access to unconditional love for others, just changed the whole perspective of my life. And that book's right on for so many parts and passages in it. Anam Cara by John O'Donoghue.
how do you spell it's Adam Cara, Kara?
Anam, so ANAM, Cara, CARA, Anam Cara. Spiritual wisdom from the Celtic world.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to be checking that out. I don't know if you got a chance to check out the website, but we do have a catalog of all the answers to this question that every guest has given. So it makes an excellent reading list.
Yeah, man.
ever in the market for a book, and we do have links to Amazon there. So if you want a paper copy or whatever, it'll help support the show too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so that one sounds awesome. Letting Go by David Hawkins. And
Yeah, so that was amazing. I was reading that book and I was listening to some classical music. I think it was by Max Richter in the morning. Just having like such a beautiful moment with this book. And I thought I'd put it down for 2 minutes and check my booking diary for the gym, see who I'm training. Guess what the name was of the person who I was training? David Hawkins.
What?
He's dead, but
Well,
I was just stunned, and I just put my phone down. I was like, yeah, okay, I'll start reading again. Sorry, universe.
yeah, right. Speaking of universe, going back to the last question, my Jeep is actually in the mechanic shop right now because it wasn't starting, and I thought it was the starter, and he checked it, and the starter's fine. And I know the battery's good and the alternator's good because I just replaced the battery and had those checked. So it's a little weird synchro. But sorry, that was off topic.
No, it's not off topic. Do you know this guy?
No. I just moved to a new area, and so I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it?
Right? Yeah, a little bit. It's got some challenges.
All right, next time you have an issue with your car, you got to let Bill know so he's got a heads up to start looking at that part.
Yeah.
Yeah, shoot me a text. And then The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell. The way that you had described, I think it was this one that you described as too delicate, and then you came back to it, and it seemed like the page or like the amount of knowledge in those pages had gotten like thicker. Or what was the word that you used?
So Joseph Campbell came up with the archetypes, but I've read another book called Awakening the Hero Within by Caroline Pearson, I think it is. Sorry to anyone who loves that person, I got it wrong. And I read that alongside The Name of the Wind, which is a fiction, which is like it's like an adventure fiction. Anyway, I read them alongside one another, and it sort of taught me how writers tell a great adventure story using the archetypes. And through doing that and reading them next to each other, going chapter for chapter, it was literally like, I forgot the name of the author for The Name of the Wind. That's really bad because he's amazing. It's probably one of the best adventure books I've ever read. And he followed almost to the T the archetypes and then really fleshed it out in a really beautiful way. And then through understanding the symbolic nature of story, you then, when I listen to people talk about the Bible, or I listen to people talk about other religious scriptures or stories, which I used to just outcast as pure nonsense. And now I'm like, oh, no, wait, I understand the symbolism behind this. And then if you can then go and watch your favorite films again and completely watch them in a different way. And understanding the symbolic is something that will really give you depth in thought. And Carl Jung is a great place to start. And then going off into the archetypes, I can't really, I need to dip back into it, but I love it.
Well, the reason I wanted to ask about that again is because I came across this quote this morning, actually, and it's by Albert Camus, Camus. Myths are made for the imagination to breathe life into them. And so to me, what that kind of said was our imagination. So the more that we learn and are able to interpret personally these myths that we hear about growing up, we're able to like relate to them more. So like we're the ones that breathe life into them, which is like what you were talking about, how the same coming back to the same book later on in life, like the meaning kind of change, it evolves, right? Those words change.
Yeah.
And I think
and it's I also understand. I remember going up to an Orthodox Jew in where where I was living in London, North London, Tottenham. And I remember just asking, I was like, what are you reading? And he just looked at me and he was there like, I'm not reading. Like his eyes were in this book and he was quite obviously reading. I just stood there and he was there like, I'm not reading, you wouldn't understand. And I was there like, and he was smiling and I just asked him, I said, is it like when if you say enough words over and over again, those words will fill up the part of your brain which has thought, which then allows you to feel peace behind the thought that you're having. It's almost like if you keep saying a mantra over and over again, the meaning of the words lose they don't make any sense anymore, but you're behind them and you're sat in like this feeling, this transcendent feeling, because the part of your brain which is usually thinking up words is preoccupied by saying this mantra over and over again, and then you're released by thought that way. And he didn't really acknowledge that. He just sort of like smiled, and I was like, okay, I'm off. Thanks for dispelling your wisdom. He didn't tell me, just stood there humbly.
I think you nailed it on the head, because like that mantra, it allows you to be more an observer of your own actions and thoughts, because your mind is occupied by the mantra. So you can really, like, it's like you're saying, like the underlying layer behind the actual reading, like there's it's almost like another being there.
I guess you've got the ego preoccupied, so the prefrontal cortex is preoccupied with language, which then allows, I guess, you to drop into the true self, and then you're in between, a space between you and your ego, and then in between that space, like, I guess you can observe the emotion which is coming up. It's just another type of meditation, but through mantra. I've not tried it yet. Like it was one of my New Year's sort of resolutions, to go and understand the mechanism, that's such a bland word, the mechanism of prayer and mantra, because if they're in all religions, and I love listening about all religions, and I really see the benefit of them. But what is the actual mechanism of it psychologically, which frees you from, I don't know, egoic thought, I guess.
What are your opinions on mantras? I know that you've talked about them before. Have you?
Oh, I've dabbled. They absolutely have power. If people don't believe it, put your mind to it and just do it. See what happens. That's all I can say. I'm a huge believer in them.
Yeah. I don't really necessarily believe in them. Actually, that's affirmations, isn't it? When you write down something positive that you want to happen.
Yeah, very, very similar, just daily. Find something that you want to move yourself towards, a goal, a thing that you want to have happen, whether it's a raise, a job, and just repeat it, many times a day, over and over, either in your head out loud or out loud. Put that vibration out there and see what happens. It's one of those, I equate it to... I forget who said it, but it's essentially, if you ask the universe a question, it's always going to answer you. But are you going to be looking for the answer that it's going to give you, or is the answer that it's giving one that you want to hear? And so I just kind of put mantras out there as just throwing your intention out, and, whether it's molding, from within all of the connections in your world and keeping that as a present-minded things that moves you towards it, or, if it's something that shifts the world, more towards your direction. Either way, I've had, huge fan of it.
Yeah. I bet someone actually gave me I went to see this guy once, and he was running a retreat, and he invited me on this retreat. And I didn't have enough money, and he kind of said to me, like, is money always an issue for me? And actually that kind of stopped me in my tracks, and I had to think about it. And I think from my childhood, again, from like parents splitting up when you're young and money being an issue, you begin to push the idea of money away, and you almost create a negative mantra, which is, money is the root of all evil, and things like that. And he actually gave me a money mantra on an MP3 file that he sent me. And I went out to the park 3 or 4 days in a row and I listened to it. And it just it just gave me a money neurosis. It just sent me tumbling into thinking about why money had always been an issue for me, which then did set me up because I knew how to do my own healing because I just healed my PTSD. So I just followed the same sort of steps of like surrender to the feeling that I have around money, like for good, like look at the positive and the light, look at the positive and the negative, the dark and the light, write that list, like separate them, understand what the light would bring you, and how the darkness maybe is more of a distorted thought from a previous time. And I just went in deep. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and a load of other books, which sort of gave me a bit of an understanding of financial literacy. And now I feel a lot happier with money, and I know that in the future it's going to come based on my actions. And it's a good feeling. But it all started off with a little money mantra, but it didn't affect me in the way that I thought it would. It just gave me that little niggle of a neurosis, and I knew at that point I had to turn into that and really face it and go and grapple with it.
So I kind of like that. It's a classic mantra, You asked, you got, an answer, or at least, how to figure out the answer, but it's not how you were going to anticipate it. So you took it and you ran with it. And it's one of the things I find interesting about like transcendental meditation. It's the same type of thing where you're just trying to get yourself into a certain mode and way of thinking and emotion. The idea that, if you're going down to the store to get something, your goal is to go down to the store, but you're not thinking, go to store, go to store, go to store, go to store. You've got all these other thoughts going on. And, I think mantras are kind of a good way to get your mind kind of geared in a direction, thinking in a direction, and thinking along a line so that, the store is your destination, whether it's finance or whatever your mantra may be. It's, figuring out a way of thinking that just, kind of, I guess the best way is to say like, swimming in the ocean. You got to find the way to swim within the currents to your destination. And, for whatever reason, I don't know. It seems that that type of mantra type thing unlocks that within people.
Yeah. It that reminds me of the psychedelic journey as well. Like you're going with all these intentions of what you want to see, feel, come up. And then it doesn't happen how you're planning on it, like never. And then the struggle, the battle in that psychedelic journey is something completely different to what you think it's going to be. And you end up letting go of something in that moment, which then gives you, when you're not sober, but when you're not feeling the medicine, which then shines light on the intention that you went in to it with, and releases you from that like sort of strain of thought. So it always comes back around in itself in some magical way. And you never really know how it's going to happen, but it does.
Question number 4. What rule do you have for yourself that you never break, and why do you think that it's important?
Telling the truth, like my truth, nothing but the truth, always the truth. I lied to myself so many times before my my breakthrough in mental health, but it's just, I won't. Now it's come to the point where even my friends, when they come and they ask for advice and we sit down and stuff, and they're trying to explain a story and they're trying to get away with not telling their truth in that story, and I can hear it. It's like glaring. It's like the nail stuck out of their forehead and asking why their head's in pain. And of course you don't want to just grip onto it and pull it out. But I'm just now fiercely compassionate for my friends to the point as I just don't let them. It's like I've got my finger on their true self and they're trying to squirm out from underneath the finger. And it's like, no, man, like if I'm going to tell my truth, you're going to tell your truth as well. And that's that's the one rule. And always thinking of being of service to other people with that like truth and that light that you have that comes with honoring that truth. Like, I'm ex-military, so for me, I think getting to the front line in Afghanistan and wanting to serve my country or to serve something that was bigger than myself, even though I don't necessarily agree with the politics and everything of why, like, that's a bigger story for another day, but that innocent part of myself inside of me, which just always wants to honor the truth, was probably the driving force that got me out to Afghanistan and into a war, but in a distorted sort of way, I guess. But I've always just had this part of me that wants to fight for what's right and what's good and for what's fair. And yeah, I guess I almost died for that belief at one point. And really that strength from that part of myself that developed in war, I've taken into battle with myself and my demons. Like, I rely on that warrior energy from time to time, but only inwardly. Like, now you'd never suspect that I'd ever been in the military or in the army now, just because I've got no anger, I've got no resentment, I've got no hate towards anyone, any human being, really. Even the person who shot and killed my friend, I don't know who that is. Like, so therefore, how can I be angry at someone that I don't know? It's just, yeah. And I guess that truth is what sent me into my despair and my PTSD, because I got asked a question when I was going for officer training after I came back from Afghanistan. They said, what are the nationalities of the people who flew the planes into the Twin Towers? And I had no idea. And I was sat in front of this officer and he was like, so why did, like, you know, he didn't ask me, why did I go? I guess at that point, the eye contact between us asked me, why did I go? And that, you know, that toppled my house of cards. And from that point, I was searching for my truth of why I went. And ultimately, by finding out that truth and then staying true to myself, that gives me my greatest strength. So I'll never let that go. And I'll never lie to myself, and I'll never lie to my friends.
That's powerful. Just for listener edification, how old were you when you joined the military, and where did you go?
Yeah, I joined when I was 18. Very suddenly, I dropped out of college, even though I was quite well educated. Just couldn't hack it. There's a long story behind probably why, just family issues, not wanting to stay where I was. And obviously the Twin Towers happened, and we also had a school friend who was killed in Iraq. And yeah, just the amount of stuff on TV, Ross Kemp in Afghanistan, and watching these people coming back from war and coffins and stuff, and just like, there was just a real cooler sense of purpose. Behind leaving for it. And then within a year, I was in my battalion. I was deployed at the age of 19. So I was just part of a fighting unit in the infantry, the Rifles, 4th Battalion. And we went out to Sang in Helmand Province, probably one of the lariest places in Afghanistan, at least where UK troops were based. I don't really know too much about the US side of it. And I was trained to search for IEDs, roadside bombs, at the front of that fighting patrol. So you were an infantry soldier, but also had the added pressure of walking around with a metal detector, searching and clearing a safe route for people to walk along behind you. So you're out 10, 15 meters in front of your patrol. Just such a heavy job. I think 1 in 4 of us in that job role were killed on that tour. It was just, yeah, very heavy, very heavy. And on that tour, as I mentioned earlier, I was watching as my best mate got shot through the face. So that, you know, when you hold someone so close to you, like in your heart, and, you know, your brothers, and you're out there reading books together and talking about how big a spliff you're going to smoke when you get home and everything else. And then you see that person get taken away or just suddenly killed in front of you. It's like if you believe in universal consciousness, I saw myself die, and that was, incomprehensible. And I guess that will lead into a question in a bit. So that was just a little bit of a background.
Wow. Yeah. The call or the urge to go and serve your fellow human beings is, something that I also experienced. So, and a lot of people did,
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's part of human nature to serve. Like, I honestly think it's part of our driving force. It's like the way, like, how else would we have ever survived, like, as a species, if we didn't have that inbuilt sort of urge to serve and look after one another.
And then the best, I think, in my opinion, the best way to do that is by being honest and by telling, our truths, having conversations like this. So, thank you for being a guest.
It's an absolute honor to come on. It's why I love podcasts. I love how all of this is just coming freely up from my unconscious, and I like give it a month. I'll listen to this back, and I'll listen for, is there any bitterness about when I'm telling this? Is there any, where do I need to add more language? Like, I need to remember the names of these authors who write these amazing books, because you need to be able to share them, like stuff like that. Like, it's humbling.
That's amazing. I love that you're going to use the show for that.
Yeah.
It makes me happy. All right. Question number 5. If I were to ask your best friend, what is the one thing they would say you need to work on the most, and why?
To take my finger off them when they're trying to lie to themselves. Maybe to reach out more. I'm very good at waiting for people to come to me when they need me, but I don't necessarily have an urge to pick up the phone and make plans myself when I feel like my friends would love it more if I did that. I just think it's been very difficult. I'm going to make an excuse now. Listen to this. I think I've just, as a student, I've not had a lot of money. And before that, I was traveling around, getting drunk, taking drugs, and spending my time and energy on just pure hedonistic pleasures and pursuits. So I think it's all going to change. And what my friends don't know, like, the only reason why I want to get wealthy now is so that I can have my friends over. That's all. I don't want money for any other reason that I can chill with my mates in beautiful settings and invite them over and tell them how much I love them. Like, that's it. And it's taken great sacrifice to go away and do my studies this late in my life and pull myself apart in a pandemic and not have my family there because I've needed space for my family to understand myself. Like, they would definitely say he needs to work on turning up more or reaching out more and setting things up, but all of that will come. I can feel that it's coming. It'll just be a couple of years time. I've just got to claw myself back from my hectic 20s and get myself set up.
Well, it seems like a lot of people are doing self-development work, or at least I'd like to think so.
Yeah, man.
Especially after 2020 and all that shit.
Yeah, well, we just, the beauty of slowing down means that our minds slow down as well, and like, you can either sit there and watch TV show after TV show, but you can feel that inside of you, that stagnation, and it's horrible. And I think so many people have decided to go inwards now, and which is just great. I think there's a mass softening happening at the same time, but also there's people who still live in fear and isolation, aren't there? So I guess it just depends what sort of sector of society you're looking at. And it's always important to look at all the different sectors, because I live in great privilege compared to a lot of people.
Yeah, that reminds me of, I don't know if it was a quote or a meme I saw, but something about how exploring inner space is more vast and exciting than actually exploring outer space, like starships and stuff. But
Yeah.
it's forced a lot of people to, stay inside and do that, whether they like to or not. And they can try to fill it with meaningless things, but they, deep down inside.
Yeah. But it's just the switch that, for me, like for the listeners who don't know, like I had a massive spiritual experience on psychedelics where I went from a world of suffering and a victim narrative and overnight changed that victim narrative. And I would say, like, as I used to describe it to my ex Lucy, I used to say, it's like the greatest love story ever told. Like, it sounds so sounds like something from the Moulin Rouge or something like that. And then she was like, okay, yeah, sure. And then she tripped with me and had a similar religious sort of spiritual experience. And she was just rolling around, like hugging herself in self-ecstasy and self-acceptance. Like, it's the greatest love story ever to be told. And I was like, told you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what that brings us to question 6. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Podcasts. No, it's one thing. Like, podcasts are like painting with words, aren't they? Like, some of the time. For me it is. It's like, I love talking. I just recently did a public speaking event, my first ever one in London, which will probably come on to another question, but I used to fear public speaking, like, massively. And I didn't write any notes. And I just went up and spoke from the heart. And that was in my top 10 most powerful moments of my life, or spiritual moments of my life, knowing that I could just get up and tell my story straight from the heart, and that I wouldn't fall over my words or double guess myself or anything like that. I feel like I've gone. So what turns you on? So yeah, just connecting with people. And like, I truly believe that language is like a bioethical tool which helps shift conscious awareness within inside ourselves, and that can only come from other. So like, that space between self and other, to me, is just like the most tender, beautiful space for creativity. And I don't know how to paint. I don't know how to write poetry. I don't know how to write that well yet, but these are all things that I want to be able to do well. And I'm only going to find that from other people. So people turn me on creatively, spiritually, emotionally, and then they give me the tools to be able to express that.
Yeah, language is the key, I think. If you're onto something, in my opinion. We just had, our last guest was Blake Art, who redesigned our logo for us, and he's actually putting together what he calls the top 13 tenets on his website, which is reality-redesign.com. But he came out with number 10. He's posting them on Twitter. So yeah, go check that out if you're interested. But the first one is a quote, or the 10th one, number 10, is a quote from Terence McKenna, which I think is fitting. But he says, what we call reality is in fact nothing more than a culturally sanctioned and linguistically reinforced hallucination. Linguistically reinforced, right?
Yeah. But this, and then like once I don't know how to describe it, but once you really understand yourself and the nature of self, you can almost see how your actions, the smallest actions in your day-to-day life, are going to have massive ripples. And then if you're of servitude to other people, if you're of service to other people, you get the social engagement or the social feedback eventually. You're not looking for it, but someone will just be like, it's really nice to like be stood with you, or like you make me feel really present, or you really help me in this way or that way. And it's almost like now I know that I'm going to be supported in my life. I know I'm going to have abundance. I know I'm going to have money. I don't know how I know, but I know that whatever I'm doing in the present moment is going to, feed that back to me in some way. And it's not through, I can't see it as in like, this is going to happen at this time, this will happen at this time. I just know that everything's going to hit critical mass and I'm going to have great success in the future. And it's just such a nice, humbling feeling. And it just makes me very present and keeps me on the path, whatever the path means. I need to put it into words more. I think like Anna Watts and people like that, they come up with great stories and things like that, because some of these things you can't really put into words. They're ineffable, right? And that's why I need to learn to write more, and I need to get content out there, and I need to get it down onto paper, because that will help me. But I've got a little bit of writer's block for some reason.
That happens.
Yeah.
Question number 7. What was the most embarrassing or humbling experience of your life?
This is great, isn't it? It's like it creates like two dichotomous or two juxtaposed memories at the same time. So the most embarrassing moment of my life probably was when I was in year 9. And I came back into school one day, and all of my friends had decided that I wasn't nice enough to hang around with them anymore. And that was it. They told me I wasn't allowed to play with them. I was also meant to be captain of like the football team and cricket and basketball and everything. And I sort of lost any sort of, I don't know, status maybe at that point. And there was a real sense of abandonment. And the reason why that probably happened was, again, family stuff, which was happening, where most of the school found out that, I'm just going to say it, that my stepdad at the time was having an affair with my English teacher. So I was acting out aggressively and violently towards anyone who would tease me about that. So I was protecting myself, that vulnerability, because what was going on at home was just like tears and arguments and everything else. So I was armoring up at school, and due to my armoring up, I was losing my friends. And then because I was losing my friends and I didn't respect my teachers anymore, I was falling out of favor there, and then I couldn't go home and communicate that. And there was just a real sense of like embarrassment and shame. Maybe embarrassment isn't like shame though, and abandonment. Maybe embarrassment is meant to be more fleeting. But at that point anyway, I started flushing. I used to go bright red in the face after that point, which is a shame response. And then after that, I couldn't really deal with any type of shame or any embarrassment at all. So even the smallest thing, like a bit of teasing, was, like you've made a mistake or something and someone teases you about it, it would just flare up and I just wouldn't be able to take it. And then the most humbling experience, I guess, was when because that all contributed to my fear of public speaking and, my red cheeks. And if I was being seen, like if I was seen by lots of people, I'd go very bright red in the face. And then I'd be thinking about how red I am in the face and how embarrassed I was about my red face, that it would just make it worse. And then when I got up on stage to do the public speaking, I just said to everyone, I was like, look, I'm terrified of public speaking. And everyone in the audience laughed, and Mags, who handed me the microphone, I was like, I am, like, this has been like coming here today, this is really confronting my fear. And I just said, But this is again, I always tie things to the psychedelic experience. This is what psychedelics have taught me. They've taught me to walk out on a knife edge, which is vulnerability, and look down into the fear of what could happen and acknowledge it, but then look into the light and say why it's not going to happen because of what I do have and all the lessons that I've learned. And then to breathe and regulate myself. So I said to everyone after explaining that thing, I said, if everyone would just give me a smile now and just give me that social feedback that I'm welcome, and I'm going to smile back. And I did. And then I said, and now if everyone could just take 3 breaths with me, that will really help me ground me. My leg's shaking right now. Like I can feel it shaking and my arm's shaking. And then everyone breathed with me for 3 seconds. And I closed my eyes in front of everyone. And then I just said to them, my legs stopped shaking now. And then I opened my eyes, and then everyone was there smiling. And I was there like, it works. I feel grounded. Now I'm free to carry on talking straight from the heart. And just to fucking nail that and know from the experience of what I'd been through, that shame, embarrassment, rejection, isolation, on top of grief and everything else, and to be able to walk up there with no notes and just speak straight from the heart and look everyone in the eyes, and to know that I was looking at them and they were looking at me, and just tell my story straight up, just humbling. And the real humdingling came afterwards when people came up, and I just didn't even think people afterwards, they would come up and they'd form circles around me and start speaking to me and ask me questions, like good, deep questions about themselves to me. And I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'll try and answer that best I can, and start speaking back. And then you're like, this is powerful, man. Like, and you can freak out on that if you want it. Like, you can be like, well, do I want to step into the light this much? Like, but yeah, I do. I want to talk of peace, and I want to talk of poverty and like real important things, and shed light on the darkness. Of course I do. Like, I can't do anything else but want to do that now. Like, that's got to be my calling. And it takes courage and stuff. And it's just humbling to know that that people listen, that I've got friends around me to support me. And it's scary at times, but it's like nothing could be as scary as war, I guess. But
that's very empowering.
Yeah.
And speaking from the heart that's empowering. Like that's people were gravitated because we're forming circles around you because they could sense that you're not trying to BS them, right? And you touched on that in the answer to your in the last question, speaking from the heart and not really knowing what to say. Oh, by the way, you're asking the audience to participate with you to calm yourself down. Not only is it an amazing trick to actually accomplish what you did, but to grab their attention, and to rope them in, that's a great just public speaking.
Well, and it's something we all know because, people say that speaks to my heart. And if you're speaking to somebody's heart, your heart is a muscle. It's a neuron, it has neurons, it thinks. So, there could be very, very deep wisdom into doing that, because when you ask yourself and you think of yourself, and you look deep and you feel how your heart feels, like your heart is truthful to you. So yeah, it's a good place to ground, and yeah, that's beautiful, asking other people to join you in that. I like it.
Yeah,
That's a trick I'm gonna have to use sometime.
Yeah, someone came up and they said, "Are you sure you haven't done this before?" It's like they felt the moment when the whole energy shifted, and when I felt grounded, it was like they felt grounded in the audience. I just know that's how consciousness works. I know it is. I know that we're that tapped into each other's, one another's sort of sensory experience. And I know that if you ground yourself, then that just ripples out through the crowd. It has to be that.
And it makes sense. You hear comedians talk about, that it's almost hypnotism, that the crowd gets into this trance and they're going along with you. You can look at speeches and number generators, that as people get more emotionally connected or disconnected, that you have, statistical changes in these machines. And you start tying all these weird little things together. And yeah, it starts to really point that, we can be very powerful, when we're open to each other and honest with each other. And it breeds this weird, succinctness. It brings us together as one. It makes us less others.
And I'll tell you when it's most, where I've experienced it on a plane where it's too obvious, is when one person takes psychedelics in a group and the other people don't take it, and you get a contact high. The people around you start saying, I feel high. And then, so we had it in this warehouse that I was living in, and I thought I was just chilling in my own in the corner, listening to music and Alan Watts. And I took, 3 grams of golden teacher mushrooms. And then one of my friends came out, she sat down in front of me and she was like, I'm going to do some painting. I was like, go on, Joanna, you do some painting. I'll just watch these spirits flying around in the sky. So she's doing this painting. She's looking at me. She said, I feel like a child. And I was there like, you then be a child. And then slowly another housemate came out, and we were just chilling and vibing, and I was just high as shit, just having a great time. And then I think it the England World Cup match was on, and I wanted to put it on, and I got up and I started faffing for the laptop. I couldn't work the laptop because I was just, the laptops don't make sense when you're high. And so one of them, who has a bit more of a anxious sort of state of mind, he tried doing the laptop and he couldn't work it out. When it was his projector and the laptop, he knows how to figure it out. And then someone else went over to help him, and we started getting dysregulated, and no one could work anything. And I was up walking around okay, well, I started panicking because I felt his dysregulation, his anxiety. And then everyone started moving around the warehouse in a manic state. No one could work anything. I said, right, let's put some lights on. Lights will help. No one could find a light switch. And I'm just in disbelief. I'm like, and then I just figured it out. It's I need to go and sit down. I need to go and sit down in my armchair and just sit there and wait. And I went and sat down in my armchair, and everyone sort of went off to a different area of the warehouse. And I got on WhatsApp, and I was just everyone breathe. It's okay. And I had to really calm people down in that way, and then take myself off into my room and just watch a film and just let people re-enter the communal space without me being there. Because for a moment I was scared. It was like a spiritual emergency. They would, you can believe it or not, I wanted to be proved by science, but we are that tapped into one another. And when you take mushrooms, when there's complete no ego's completely dissolved, it's both awe-inspiring, or not awe-inspiring, it's both scary, terrifying, and beautiful, magical, and everything at once. To know that we are that tapped into each other.
Well, and when people don't know they're tapped into it, then you just think of all the wild emotion, the things that you normally do, the things that are triggered, whether it be on purpose through manipulation or even just trying to sell you M&Ms or something. There's, these things that pull you, and you're having that power on people around you. And conversely, people are having that power on you. And this is a fascinating view, because this is something we all know. A person with bad energy walks in the room, and you feel that zonk out, or the right person walks into the room and you just feel that brightness. The party comes alive. And what is that? It truly is something. We know
it's about
this.
Being seen. It's about, can you walk into a place and know that if you come in with light, love, loving consciousness and presence, and you know that other people are going to look at you. And this is where it used to switch in my head. I would used to say, before I had my breakthrough, that's narcissistic to think like that other people would feel would look at you and feel positive by the way that you hold yourself with grace. I used to think that was narcissistic, because maybe that's what was just taught in our family, or like by being seen, you're a show off or you're arrogant. And now I just know that it's the truth. If you just walk in with like loving presence, like whoever you're going to come across as a potential person to fall in love with, and I don't mean erotically, I mean in the sense of agape love for all humanity and everything like that. If you walk into a room that present with that grace, like people see it and everything changes. And it's like you said, it's the same when bad energy walks in the room. You know, someone's like huffing or straight into this, you know what so and so did, and blah blah blah, neggy energy. And
but this is great, because that means that, you know, this truly means that when somebody inspires you, it changes you. You know, the placebo effect works because you believe in the system, because doctors are there telling you, because you look at this machine and it can help you, and that builds up this extra energy behind it. But if you think about that, if you're faking it till you make it to all of your friends, in the way that putting out positive energy and being positive, you're truly like enacting this true magical change within themselves, within the world around them, and it spills back over to you. And, you know, I don't know, it's just one of those things that people should really just try to think about as they're going out about their daily lives. You know, the idea that you can let your emotions get to you, or if you smile, you know, the muscle memory of smiling and just doing that, do that for 5 minutes, and you'll start to feel happier. You know, stand in a power pose like Superman, and your confidence will boost up. And, you know, if you know those things, that you can do this. I mean, imagine if everybody did that and there was this magical, like, huge effect. I mean, overnight the world could change.
We've seen that with gurus and everything like that. That's when one person has managed to give out that light and that love, and the people around them have completely surrendered to that person. They've surrendered to the light and love of that person without any baggage being in between them, and they've devoted themselves to that person. I'm not saying it's necessarily a good thing. I think you can find that in anyone at any time, and it doesn't have to be a guru. But ultimately, that's what happens when you get mass crowds all surrendering to one person in a form of love, and that person just reflects love back.
Well, if you think of life as a vibration, and they've tuned in a vibration, you're merely resonating with them. It's not that you're picking up on a system. There's an energy there, and, you know, it's kind of like a tuning fork. You know, when you're in that presence, you know, there's an effect on you it's not as strong as the fork, but you can feel it. And
that's essentially psychedelics knock out that part of the brain which stops you from having the baggage in between you and who's guiding you. So this is my theory. Like, yeah, there's the work that happens within. So I'm writing a dissertation on this. There's the work that happens within inside of yourself, and the Western narrative usually just looks at the self perspective or the self narrative, but actually the surrender that comes to someone else who's done who's been on the journey themselves, has a regulated nervous system, and then someone's coming to that person with a dysregulated nervous system, and the psychedelics knock out the part of the brain which puts the baggage in between you and that person, and then it's you accepting the love of your guide, the unconditional love of your guide, which engulfs any shame and anything that you have which is coming up in your trip. And when you surrender your nervous system to someone else, you finally learn to completely get back to homeostasis. And it's almost like you're taking your first breaths again, because your body just goes, and just releases all of this tension. And then once you've learned that state of homeostasis again, because beforehand you've had cumulative trauma all the way up until that point, you know that there's a way to get back to that state within yourself. And then meditation makes sense to you. And then other self-care practices make sense to you. And then you start looking after yourself to get back to that state of tranquility and homeostasis, which you've not been in for, well, some people who didn't learn to regulate themselves off their parents have been in a chronic state of, you know, secondary attachment responses to other people. So they become introverted and isolated, or they become anxiously attached to anyone who has love and light, and they take that love and that light.
Well,
And then when you can just completely remove all that through surrendering to someone else's central nervous system, you find that love inside of yourself through their loving central nervous system. It just changes everything. It switches the perspective of the world's looking in at you to you are at one and you're looking out at the world, and it just changes the perspective of the way that you see everything.
Yeah, it reminds me of like mirror neurons that people have, where some people are just more capable of, feeling a person's emotion, like a person is going through some sort of trauma, grief, or feeling, and they can sense it and experience it. I've also heard this to call back to what you were talking about before with schizophrenia, that if you're around certain people that are having schizophrenic episodes, that people will start to have the similar symptoms, that they'll start perceiving things in that way, that there is a, this medical, thing of just being around other people, that it kind of bleeds over.
Absolutely.
Yeah, our energy absolutely does introduce us before we physically enter the room. And as just to point out another example of that, and this will become relevant with future guests, hopefully the next episode that we release, but think about what happens when a judge enters the courtroom, right? First of all, a man with a gun tells you to shut up. And then everybody has to stand, and this guy comes in, right? And he's dressed in black, and he gets to sit up real high and whatnot, right? Like, what kind of energy is that setting? Right. That's someone. So absolutely, there's something to our energy setting the mood. And
these roles, and the roles that we identify with and how they're perceived or sort of like written into society. Of a doctor is always going to be right, or a dentist is always going to be really clever. Or, I don't know. Just these what we assign to these roles in terms of intellect and trustworthiness and everything else. And it's just, you can really just see why. I think it's like in Hinduism, where they say that like life on planet Earth is just like, it's a drama of the gods. It's like, we've got all these masks on and we're playing all these roles constantly, and it's
I like how Darren Brown,
I love Darren Brown.
What he says we are the stories that we tell ourselves. And the magic of what he does is, knowing that, people become way more predictable, and we don't think we are.
Yeah. And Caroline Myss, your biography becomes your biology.
I like it.
Powerful.
All right, question number 8. What is your greatest fear? How did you overcome it, if you have?
It was death. It was death. And whenever I used to think of death, or not necessarily like the way in which I was going to die, but what was beyond death, it used to give me a feeling of vertigo. I guess that may have been from watching my friend die and the feeling of the world spinning around me. Dissociation, I guess. So whenever I used to think of death, I used to get this feeling, like distorted, like vision or feeling of where I was in the present moment. It's pretty terrifying thing to, all you have to do is think of death and you're pretty much having like a hallucination, or you're just completely ungrounded. And then I think, I don't fear death itself now, like not at all. Like, to die is just another adventure. I think that's a Peter Pan quote or something similar to that. I've had enough psychedelic experiences to know that, or not to know, to feel and to really believe in that we are just a sort of projection of consciousness, maybe like through a magnifying glass onto like the planet sort of thing. And once my life in the material form, once the magnifying glass is removed, I'll just disperse into consciousness once again, and just, yeah, I think it'll be quite a beautiful experience in itself. And through watching my friend die in Afghanistan, and I was there when my nan had a stroke and crossed over. She didn't wake back up from the stroke. And I saw how even death, which I thought was just this single experience, I suddenly saw that death is on a spectrum, and the way that we can die can be very different as well. So why aren't we choosing to bring death into more awareness into our societies, and looking at dying with grace and dignity and in a much better way? And I think that's partly because we've cut our ties with our elders too early, and there's the wisdom and information isn't flowing downhill like it should be from one person to the next. And I think that's crumbling us, like as a society. And now I want to be a death doula, so I want to go and sit with people as they're dying. I want to be someone different than a family member who might be in pain and grief, or someone different than a nurse who's giving you drugs. And just, I know I don't even need to say anything. I know that presence and just being there, and that person being like, why the hell are you here? And it's like, just because I know that, like, what I can do for you in these last few days, months, or whatever it is, I know that I can have an input, or I can help you pass with more love and more light. And it's like, to turn that, something which used to terrify me, on its head, and to live that way now. I haven't started that job role, but I'm going to train in it for sure. It'll be a great honor. And I think that it means that when I come to die, I think I'll be fully surrendered in my death. I hope I will be. I hope there's nothing left that I need to say or do. And I know that I can not have to hang on to it, my life and my body, and resist it. I would, like I'm taking the medicine with conscious awareness, and surrendering to that experience in terms of psychedelic state. And I think it'll be, I just think it'll be a beautiful moment. Or I hope it'll be a beautiful moment, but who knows? It could be something completely different to what I'm expecting, and I surrender that to myself as well, I guess. But yeah,
I love the term death doula. That just number one, it sounds cool, but it also because it really makes the connection to have about how death is actually it's a rebirth, right? Like, nobody remembers being birthed into this world, right? And when we die, we're being, we're going back to wherever we came from, right? So it's kind of like a birth. And then a doula, right? Somebody that helps usher in a consciousness from, the other side of the realm into this life. And then, on the other side of the spectrum, when you reach the end of this life, to be ushered out into, back out into the ether, I guess. But you touched on just the mention of presence. When you are around someone that is close to death, there's a closeness that you get to spirit. This past year, I had the blessing of witnessing my mother-in-law pass away in hospice after coming home from the hospital she was at home for 2 days. And going through that experience, that is a very powerful excuse me, it is a very powerful moment, and it reminds me of an answer that I gave to one of these questions when I did the 13 questions. It's episode 38. If anybody's interesting, but I think I mentioned somewhere in there that and it speaks to the place of death has in our culture currently, is that the greatest one of the greatest gifts that a parent can give a child is a good death. And because I think that there is a spectrum, like you were saying, of how well we die, and I think that that can be partly found in maybe the idea of Valhalla, that is that we find in the northern traditions, and the Vikings or whatnot, you have you. So, and I agree 100%. I guess is what I'm saying.
Mate, yeah, thanks for sharing, man. Felt your emotions there, man. Sorry for your loss.
Yeah, death is powerful.
Yeah, man.
So,
Absolutely.
to add on to that, did your psychedelic experience give you a different perception on time, or our place within, being, outside of the moment or always in the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it was timeless in the space that I was in at one point. So when I had the one love epiphany, that love is indivisible, that the moment that you start dividing it, whether that's between man, woman, that's the original divide of love, and then it sort of it ripples off. Once I had that experience, something broke inside of me, and I was like a little baby Bambi on the floor, like curled up, like sort of like shaking. And I closed my eyes, and I was just like, I was in heaven on earth, and I was shown this path going into this light, and there were people helping people up onto this path, and it felt like I was there for a long time. But probably in reality, I had my eyes closed for 2 seconds. And for all of that time that I was there, it felt like someone had pulled apart my chest, and there was just like laser beams, or no, that's like beams of sunlight pouring into my heart, like for the first time, and that was all timeless. Like, yeah, like there's many times in psychedelics it's timeless, and I just think that's got to be close to passing over, this timeless bliss. Maybe you stay there forever. I can only hope. But yeah, like, they say in order to live, first you must die, or words to that effect. Yeah.
I like that you mentioned timeless, because I would like to think that this podcast, like, we don't talk a lot about current events, so I'd like to think that the topics we talk about are timeless. So
yeah, when this got sent over, I was so thankful and grateful, because usually it's about me telling my story, and like, cool, I like telling it. I like, it is nice, but like, it's all the stuff in my past. I also want to be able to be challenged on my thought of who I am now and what that means for my future. And someone who just continuously speaks about their past and their story and stuff. I don't know. For me, it just gets a bit dry coming out of my mouth. Like, I don't want to say the same words. I'm not really interested in my old story. They're great for moments of clarity, or like to help people understand themselves. I don't mind that at all. Like, I don't mind disclosing about myself in a moment of vulnerability towards someone else, but to sit on a podcast time and time again and tell the same story, or go on BBC News or Channel 4 or whatever it is that I do, cool, but I really want to be a motivational speaker at the same time. So this is like my first opportunity, so I love it. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for being a part of it. Moving on to question number 9. What is your single greatest driving force in life, and how do you further it?
Mm. I guess it's like strengthening community with love. There's something about community that I keep coming back to, and like building community or strengthening community, and it's just love. I guess it is just love. Like in every turn, it all is expressed from a place of love. Like greatest driving force, the force within me. Yeah. And how do I further it? By reading and understanding about where love isn't in the world, and how people are overcoming that, and how they're managing, and what people are doing to help people find love. So not just looking at the places where there's abundance of love, like go to a retreat and you'll just find lots of loving people. Yeah, cool. But like, who are the people creating retreat spaces for people who can't afford it? Or, like looking at both sides of it. But it's all driven by self-love, and wanting to spread that, and create those ripples through either small actions or big actions, and coming together with other people, whether it just be like motivating people to turn up at 9 a.m. for a park run with a couple of hundred other people and get people outside and get them moving. I just helping people to overcome trauma and find their own self-love. Like, that's it. Like, it's that simple for me. And yeah, because I know that love can come from others. Oh, we can find self-love from other. Like, now I've learned that. Now it's like, wow, that's the greatest gift that you can ever give. Especially if they've never felt self-love or unconditional love for themselves. So that's my driving force. And then everything just, like my profession or my career or whatever way I go in terms of business, that will just be an expression of that love, and a way to help people find it quicker for themselves, just through good business, I guess. Yeah, hope that answers it.
Yeah, love is all you need. We have one jingle for the show that we do on our intros, and it's the Gratitude Jingle. And that's the whole point of that, is just to get people to generate and that love feeling in, for themselves. Get them in the habit of thinking about one thing that they're grateful for. So Adam and I do that before the show, or before we go into the intros.
Nice.
But yeah, man, love's all you need, really.
Such a hippie these days. Actually, it's not a hippie. Let's remove that. Anyone can find that.
Question number 10. Who are or were your role models and why?
So I had role models in the army. And role models, why were they role models? Because they didn't lead with dominance. You have a dominance hierarchy, or you have a prestigious leader, someone who leads by example. And I quickly made the distinction between those two ways of being, those two ways of managing people, or those two ways of getting things done. So my role models in the army were, like the first firefight I was ever in, and we were pinned down. And I just didn't want to put my head up above the trench that we were in, or the irrigation ditch, but and I just looked up to see my section commander, Brett Campbell, who was like 23, 24. And he was just laying down rounds and getting people to draw in fire on this spot to suppress the enemy. 23, 24, like doing that. And above him, leaves, like chopped up leaves, were falling and landing on his helmet. And I was like, what the fuck is going on there? And it was the bullets coming through the trees. And they were that close to the leaves, which were just above his head. And he was still up there, like drawing in fire to beat the enemy with overwhelming firepower. And I was like, I looked at that. And then afterwards, I sort of made a deal with myself that I would turn into the fire. Like, it didn't happen like that quickly. It's not like Like, it still took a couple of more firefights before I was up firing like he did. But I know it's war, and I don't want to glamorize it at all. But in that moment, we were fighting for our lives. And when you look up to someone like that, like, couldn't help but see a warrior, and like, that gave me my warrior energy. And I didn't have it up until that point. I didn't have that aggression. To me, the army had been a game, escapism. And now I found myself in the front line of Afghanistan. And there's many more examples like that. Will Rigby, his brother got killed when he was in Iraq, when they were both in Iraq. And he's just carried on and has just been a shining example of what it means to be a leader, fair, firm. And just the way that he taught me out in the field, just how to hold myself and stuff. And he just taught me a lot about, what it is to be a soldier. And then out of the army, again, I always struggled with role models because I guess I didn't really trust that many people, or I couldn't really listen to someone at great depth because there was that lack of trust. But then when I went to uni, my tutor, Christiane Sanderson, who teaches about shame, and she looked after us in our class, and our counselling skills class, and she was amazing. I learned a lot from her. And then after that, just all the role models started coming. Gabor Mate, like Rosalind Watts, like loads of people in the psychedelic community. So many writers are now my role models. Who wrote A Man's Search for Meaning? What's his name?
I should know that. A Man's Search for Meaning was...
So to listeners, like, it might sound funny that I can't recall names so easy. I have this thing in my head that whenever I go to recall a name, something comes up to stop me from recalling that name, and it really winds me up. But it's just something I have to live with. Eric, what's his name? Anyway.
Oh, is it?
Viktor Frankl.
Viktor Frankl, yes.
Sorry, Victor. Yeah, so obviously reading like what he went through in those camps and stuff, and then finding meaning out there and finding meaning when he returned. Like, for me, that I tapped into that through my experience of going to war. Like, it's nothing on par, but there's so many role models in books, like so many conversations I have with these authors. And I should mention some people like Esther Perel and Brené Brown and Audre Lorde and Adrienne Marie Brown, and so many different people. I really like reading stuff on from indigenous cultures and things like that now, because I do believe we're trying to get back naturally in some way towards that way of living. Like, it's our calling back to the tribe. So the more I tend to read on there and sort of like the atrocities that have happened against indigenous people, and that just, it's sad, but at the same time, there's so much power in the voices of those stories.
There is huge power. I'm recently delving into kind of like the same topic. So I bought this book called Braiding Sweetgrass, and it's the story of right up, same lane, right?
Yeah, man. Yeah, we did. I think in Rome, there's this research tool that I use called Rome Research. Really great research tool. It's about smart note taking systems, and we do a book club every now and then. And that was one of the first books that we did.
Yeah, I've only got like 3 stories in, so they're short stories, but just one of the taglines for the show is wisdom delivered for the 21st century. And something that we also like to say is that we're standing on the shoulders of giants, which, we are, because we're only here because of our ancestors, and, what stories did they pass down. And so one of the aims of this show is to kind of memorialize that wisdom, and yeah, the wisdom that's found in the stories preserved by our people like our grandparents who can remember the older days. Like, that's something to be valued and re-looked at to I guess find our way if we're ever lost, right?
Yeah, and that's the missing bridge between us and our elders. It's like, when are we going to sort that out and stop putting people in these big care homes away from the kids that need to listen to to their elders?
Heard that. Question number 11. What quality do you most admire in a woman?
I saw this question. I struggled with it. Quality, what is in like a trait?
An attribute, characteristic, maybe an accomplishment.
Like just straight up that they can give birth and create life. I know that's more of like a natural thing, but in terms of qualities, like, I don't know. I think our humanness transcends what is a male or female quality. I think we can all tap into the rain, like into those qualities. And I know that if I ask that to quite a lot of my friends, they'd be like, yeah, but the way that they're more naturally a caregiver or they're more nurturing. It's they're like, hang on, like, I'm sure that the like gender roles and stuff like that comes into it just as much as anything else. But I'm sure that I can be as much as a caregiver, and I will always strive to be as much as a caregiver as my partner in the future. I struggle to think of what qualities that women have that we as men can't have inside of ourselves at the same time, by embracing our own effeminate nature, which is, the animus, the female inside the male, and women, the male inside the female. Like, all we have to do is spend good time discussing these things, and we begin to embody them. So yeah, I'm going to keep that one short there.
All right. Question. Well, just a comment. I like your approach to the question. I think it's thoughtful. It is refreshing. I'm noticing a trend in the answers to this question, so kind of toying with the idea of switching it out for another one. But yeah, so the trend, in case anybody is wondering, is intelligence. So thank you for your answer. But yeah, moving on to question 12. What is the most courageous thing you have ever done or seen in your life?
To accept intimacy from men. Still struggle with it now, but to take myself out of that hierarchy, that status that we so easily do when meeting other men, and being able to surrender to men, and to be able to receive men intimately, and to be there for them on a level that I've never had shown towards me by other men. Maybe that's a bit arrogant to say that about myself, like to ever seen or done in your life, but ultimately another man showed me that side of himself to me in the first place, like my psychedelic guide. And then to keep passing that on and to be there for other men in that way, like, yeah, I think I still struggle with it now. But other than that, like, I saw loads of courageous acts at war, and I think anyone who stands up and goes against the collective sort of thought of the day, or goes against that goes against social norms, and can stand up and say something with such reverence that people begin to change their minds, even though that person who's standing up there might be violently opposed or ridiculed for what they're saying. But when you listen and they're telling a truth, and you're like, they know that they might get torn down by an opposing side, yet they're still willing to stand up there. It's to me, it's the equivalent of putting their like sort of life on the line for truth. So anyone who does that, especially people who do it on a daily basis, I have a lot of love for those people who are doing those sorts of things.
That is such a cool answer. The accept intimacy from other men. We've never had that one before, at least not since I've been doing the show. And I think that speaks to how uncomfortable it is that we as men can be being vulnerable to to other men, because society wants us to have this mindset of machoism, right?
Yeah. And we've conflated intimacy with sexual connotations, and we conflated touch with sex. Man, like, men need to be held not just by women, but also men need to be held by men. Like, there's a reason why a brotherhood is forged in battle, and it's not just because of the acts which happen in the moment. It's when you go back and someone's just been killed, and everyone's standing around, and that was one of your brothers, and now you need to hug one another and allow some of that to come out. Like, there, in that vulnerability, in that moment in death, that's when you create soulmates. It's just another way of creating soulmates. Soulmates also can be created during sex. Soulmates can be created at rallies or whatever it is, but it's whenever you're in an extreme state of vulnerability and you can reach out and touch the other person, then you're bonded.
Yeah, that's super powerful stuff. Thank you for sharing, and especially that you put it first, ahead of all of what some people would automatically just go to as courageous, was war fighting, right? Mm-hmm. So the fact that you put that first, it just speaks volumes. Thank you for sharing.
No worries.
All right. Question number 13. What does it mean to be a man in today's world?
I don't know. No idea. I can tell you what it's not. It's not going with fear. It's not pushing people away. It's not being closed-minded. It's not being scared of the vulnerability of others, both in women and in men. It's not pushing away what you understand as being a feminine trait. It's the opposite of that. It's softening. It's committing to doing self-healing work and changing, the transmission of intergenerational trauma. Like, it's about stopping it with you today. I guess that's what it is now. It's a search for meaning, which brings us back to our tribe. And that doesn't have to be back to a woman. That can be back to a man or whatever. Like, it's about bringing yourself back and being present and committing to taking positive steps forward and making change. But that's also, I get a lot of women would say that as well. So again, like, maybe we're tapping into something which is part of our humanness. But definitely, we as men, we need to learn to surrender. And it's not about trying not to lose face in these moments which get us riled up into these arguments to the point of where we want to kill each other. It's about learning how to let go of that emotion, that anger and that fear in that moment, so that you can say, no worries, or okay, let me help you get what you need and I'll get what I need later, or coming to something in between. But yeah, for me, if I had to just put it in one word, or 2 words, 3 words, learning to surrender. Like that's what it is for men today, because we're not great at doing that. Women are great at surrendering because sexually they surrender at a very young age, and then us as men, like, we don't have to surrender like that. We don't have to. I think there's a fundamental difference, just even if you look at it sexually. Bit of a weird twist on this question, but it's like, where do we have to surrender to other? Anyway, that's what I got. 13 questions done.
You're out of the hot seat.
Yeah.
I like it. Surrendering is, it's an important step in healing, right? It's the first should be one of the first steps in healing, right? But I love the answer to this because it ties it right back into the beginning of the episode when we're talking about transmuting energy, right, and healing. So it's perfect. So yeah, that's the 13 questions. I know that it was brought up, I think it was mentioned once, but did you want to plug the Heroic Hearts Foundation?
Yeah. So we have Heroic Hearts Foundation, which is Heroic Hearts USA, and then we have Heroic Hearts Project UK. And our sort of role, or our charity, helps connect veterans from their base in the UK or America and take them out to psychedelic healing retreats. So we deal with logistics, fundraising, and we also branch out into research. So we've got research which is spanning continents, and just some amazing people behind it and lots of support. So yeah, if you're interested, go and check out Heroic Hearts Project and support veterans. And if you've heard that I've gone through a great journey, psychedelics have been the tool that have helped me find my way back to my tribe or society or community, and just want to do everything but fight, but just give back with love and gratitude. And it's a great charity to support.
Sounds like all about healing, which is, what I'd like to think we're doing to help people. So, if you need, listener, if you need help, the links will be in the show notes to Heroic Hearts Foundation. And Guy, thank you so much for spending some time with us. And I'm sure that we'll be in touch in the future for sure.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Why is one man rich and another man poor? Why we ain't satisfied? Why we gotta have more? Why your suicide rates on the rest so high? Why I tell you the truth but you say don't lie? Why is being a good father at an all-time low? Why is it acceptable? Yo, why? I don't know. Why she blame him and he blame her? It's useless. Ask yourself this question. Why you making excuses? Why do parents gotta bury their kids? Why we text and drive, not caring how scary it is? Why it's so hard to forgive and leave the past behind? And if you did, then that's divine. Why don't you help your brother when you see him fall? Why do we act like God don't see it all? Why do we call them black, them white, them Asians, and use labels? Now that's racism.
I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I don't wanna Hawaii. Why? I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I don't wanna Hawaii. Why? I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I don't wanna Hawaii. Why? I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why These are innocent people locked up for life, while some people can't say nothing nice. Why do we always gotta question what all of it means? And why won't you follow your dreams? Tell me why. The night when you took my dad, why'd you let me see my grandpa cry? And tell me why. And why do you choose to hide, even though you was born to fly? And tell me why. And why don't we turn from all the hate? And why don't we learn from all mistakes? Why do I keep on wrecking these fat beats? And teachers don't make more than professional athletes. And why? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why?
I don't wanna hold it. I don't wanna hold it. Oh, why? I don't wanna hold it. I don't wanna hold it. Oh, why? I don't wanna hold it. I don't wanna hold it. Oh, why? I don't wanna hold it. I don't wanna hold it. Oh, why?
This should be considered entertainment and not therapy. We hope you benefit from our resources available at 13questionspodcast.com. Thank you for listening.